Controversies never leave Phil Mickelson alone. For almost a year, he's been putting out constant fires. However, Lefty found himself in the spotlight again after fellow LIV player Pat Perez revealed that he had a different hate for the oldest PGA champion. Yes, you heard that right, and Pat didn't mince words. Lefty's beef with Pat Perez is unlike anything in the golf world. In his previous controversies, he was either throwing tantrums at the PGA Tour or getting criticized for taking bullets for LIV Golf. But this time, his colleague on the same tour didn't just have a beef with him. He literally hates him so much he can't even talk about it. So what was Mickelson's action against Perez that seems unforgivable? Stick around to find out the details. If Mickelson already wasn't being criticized enough for his stance on the Saudi League, this would set him apart. With the current rift between LIV and PGA, altercations haven't been anything new because we see people throwing tantrums at each other all the time. Sure, they could have differences in opinion, but at the end of the day, they really don't hate each other. In fact, most of them are just exaggerating this stuff to get attention. But the same can't be said about Pat, who seems to have a genuine hatred for Mickelson, who, according to him, crossed a line that's uncrossable and unforgivable. Perez appeared on Claude Harmon's Son of a Butch podcast, where he didn't mince words regarding Lefty. When it comes to Mickelson, I have a different hate for him than most people. Everyone wants to know what went down between the two, but for some reason Perez has refused to go into the details. Instead, he maintained that people don't have to know what transpired and he's not ready to go into the details either. I'm not going to go into it again and people won't know the story. But Mickelson crossed the line with me that is uncrossable and unforgivable. However, the definition of a feud is two people fighting each other. But in this case, it's more like one person hating the other guy and there really isn't much bickering involved. It's one-sided because if you think about it, Mickelson hasn't said a word about it. And maybe that's because he feels incredibly guilty about it. After all, Perez admitted that Lefty knows he screwed up, hence the apology. He knows he screwed up and even apologized for his action, but I cannot let it go. Perez also went into detail about their past relationship, saying that he's known him for a long time. And it's somewhat understandable because forgiving a friend or someone you've known for a long time for backstabbing you is way more difficult than forgiving someone you barely know, especially when it wasn't a mistake. Perez claims that Phil did it intentionally and it was actually premeditated, which made him wonder why Mickelson would have to go that far. I've known Phil for a really long time, Perez said. Like, I've known this guy forever. So when he made this action, which was totally intentional, he knew it was going to happen even before he did, and when he did it, I was terribly hurt. I was like, how can this guy do something like this? When Pat said he couldn't bring himself to forgive Mickelson for his actions even if he did state them, knowing they've been buddies for years, it made some sense. You see, while Phil and Pat might currently share a fractured equation, the duo has also shared several commonalities over their long careers. Although 6 years apart in age, they grew up in the same area of San Diego. They also played the same golf courses in junior golf and went to Arizona State. However, each had different experiences there and reached the PGA Tour where they were for over 20 years, though with vastly different degrees of accomplishment. Mickelson won 40 more times. Now, both players are competitors on LIV Golf, the controversial Saudi Arabia-backed circuit that offered them loads of guaranteed money to compete. But that's where the relationship between Perez and Mickelson ended. And if you notice, you'll never see the duo pose together in the lavish pre-tournament LIV party photographs, and you may never see them play on the same team. But when it comes to opinions on the PGA Tour, the duo are pretty much on the same page. As a matter of fact, Perez believes Phil is 100% correct in his criticism of the US PGA Tour. If anybody knows what's going on, that should be Phil. He voiced his displeasure on what was wrong with the PGA Tour. He's totally correct. They are for themselves. When the world of golf was having a hard time trying to figure out what actions Mickelson carried out that got Perez all naggy, Alan Shipnuck weighed into the controversy. Now, if you don't already know, Alan is the guy who wrote that controversial biography on Mickelson, which happened to have been the biggest stain on his otherwise decorated career. Most of Mickelson's controversies, especially his opinion on the Saudi government and his gambling problems, stemmed from that book. Apparently, Lefty didn't hold back in lashing out at the PGA Tour while explaining why he was engaged in conversations about joining the LIV Tour. He explained why he'd rather work with the Saudis instead of the PGA. They're scary mother effers to get involved with. We're aware they killed Khashoggi and even executed people for being gay over there, but I would consider it because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to transform how the PGA Tour operates. Phil continued, because we the players have no recourse, the PGA Tour has been able to get by with coercive, manipulative, strong-arm tactics. As nice a guy as Jay Monahan comes across, he won't do what's right for you if you don't have leverage. And the Saudis have finally given us that leverage. Just in case you didn't get all the gibberish, he meant he was one of the brains behind the breakaway tour, which at the time was only proposed, and he was only concerned about the cash and not the country's oppressive regime. Although Mickelson would later apologize, blaming Shipnuck for using his off-record statements, the damage had already been done. What's more, the 52-year-old even had to go into hiding due to the sheer controversy the book had caused. The dude was constantly under fire from the media, his own employer, the tour, and his peers. So one can only imagine what sort of storm this allegation from Perez would cause if it was actually revealed. Maybe Mickelson would have gone into hiding again. Besides, even if everyone attempts to shove it under the rug, we've still got some leads to figure out because Alan happened to shed some light on the incident. You see, during a Q&A session with his reader last year, someone asked Alan if the entire controversy had anything to do with sex. Shipnuck said that while he was aware of the situation, they were a bit too explosive to reveal until he confirmed it with Perez. It obviously couldn't have been about money because if it was, Perez wouldn't have found it hard to reveal the root of the feud. And maybe Shipnuck would have divulged the details without waiting to receive confirmation from Pat, which makes us believe that there was probably some sort of deviant misconduct involved. But since Shipnuck was aware of the entire controversy, why didn't he include it in his book? The author said Perez didn't want to go on the record about it, so unless it was coming from the guy's mouth, Shipnuck wasn't going to include it. We've already mentioned earlier how Pat was hurt when Phil did the questionable thing to him because he considered the 52-year-old his friend. But this isn't the first time Perez has called Mickelson out. Alan also revealed that they didn't see eye to eye during their friendship years. You would recall that after Mickelson's swipe at the PGA Tour, which turned into a controversy when he made unguarded statements about the Saudis on the killing of Khashoggi and other things, he tendered an apology stating how sorry he was and how much he regretted making those statements. But Perez wasn't having any of it. He tagged the apology as horseshit while saying Mickelson was in it for his pocket, as anyone else would. His apology was a total horseshit in the fact that he believed he was trying to make things better for the players. Phil was in it for one reason, and if anyone thinks he wasn't in it for his pocket alone, they're blanking crazy, Perez said of Mickelson. Phil was in it for himself, but I can't figure out why he chose to go down two different routes and basically bury himself on both. If he was trying to help the players, then he did it in a totally wrong way. He continued, Phil wasn't doing it for a guy like me to have some cash in my pocket because he doesn't care if I live or die or even if I play on the tour. He did this for himself. To think he's made nearly $1 billion, why is he so desperate for another $100 million grand and change so fast? So it turns out the bad blood has always been there. Oh, and apparently, Lefty not only offended Perez with his actions, but his wife Ashley as well, which makes us believe something fishy went down. On top of that, the 46-year-old has reportedly told a couple of players and caddies about the incident, and no one is comfortable revealing any of it. Maybe because of how bad the details are. But it's obvious it's been festering with Perez lately, so if he does choose to make the details public, we're sure it'll set off another chain of controversy and Lefty might be forced to speak up. But what do you think about the feud between Perez and Mickelson? Is Pat keeping the details away from the public due to their sensitivity? Or is he trying to stay in the spotlight? And we'll catch you in the next one.